Hi, this is Dr. Dan Ratner. As part of our how-to series, we're going to look at how to understand the importance of the columns, as organization and a pinpointed understanding of each thing is key to getting better. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below. And finally, you can reserve your place in one of my seminars or get any of my PDFs at www.crushingdoubt.org. I was recently interacting with one of our podcast viewers or listeners, I actually don't know which, and he brought up a question he wanted addressed that helped me to remember how many different spaces people can be in trying to sort all of this out. Here's what he said. I just don't understand the columns, or the need for them, or what the point is for them. Can you spend a few minutes on a podcast and explain them really simply so that a fifth grader could understand them? I just know there is something very valuable there, and I would like to understand it. Now, he was nice enough to start this commentary off with, I'm sure this is my issue, but, and that was very kind of him. Regardless, it made me remember that some people out there have things click about the columns at different points, or in varying degrees, and that his request could help the people with whom the columns aren't clicking much at all. So here goes. An explanation of what the columns are, why there is a need for them, and what is my point in creating them in the first place. So let's start with the fact that you and everyone else out there are in the conundrum of having too much information and too little information on this mind-body topic all at the same time. Who are you supposed to trust and why? How are you supposed to put things to rest or have any certainty in things with all of these opposing viewpoints? How can you get better if you don't know what you are supposed to be doing? We say in this mind-body community that how you are thinking about things determines a lot of how your symptoms play out. And this is true, 100%. But then, how are you supposed to think? The point of the columns is to create organization in this thinking, so that you have a guide in what to do with certain types of symptoms or in how they present. The idea is that by having the columns to rely on, you can either fold in all of the other methods that work, or let them go if they're redundant or not useful to you. The columns are there to take the best information out there and utilize it, while turning away things that are less important, not particularly useful, or in some cases downright harmful to you. Essentially, the columns are there, believe it or not, to simplify. And the reason I say believe it or not is that for some, the columns can feel confusing or more complicating. And this can even be true at first, because it's a lot of information to take in, and it's in a new way. It's even new information from a new source, if you're just meeting me or just discovering the podcast. So the source has to be vetted in your mind as well. So I do want to acknowledge, the columns do not instantly achieve their goal of simplifying for everyone. For some people, it clicks right away, but for a lot of people, it does not. It does not seem to simplify it right away. What we need to do is wade through the process of your deciding what does or does not make sense to you. As that starts to happen, the columns and their organization will provide more and more information and infrastructure to set you up for success. But I encourage you, my system works because it incorporates the process of your asking questions and slowly but surely, or sometimes quickly and all at once, getting the answers that work for you. The columns are also there to provide the full intellectual framework that you can fall back on when dealing with the emotional and sometimes illogical state of our brains in trying to deal with horrific pain and suffering from other symptoms. So what's the point? The columns are an accurate description of what is happening for you. You need that, and you need it to be organized in a way that makes sense and can be utilized. Let's just talk about organization for a second. Organization breaks problems down into manageable parts. You need that. But it is also how mind-body issues work, in parts. Use the columns to break down the parts. And there you will see the problem with much greater clarity. In the clarity lies the right questions. And by asking the right questions using science and logic, which is all 100% true, we can come to the right answers. Without the columns, we aren't organized enough in the battle against mind-body symptoms. You're flowing everywhere. There's too much information and sometimes too little. Without the columns, we do not have nearly as much of an ability to be certain. And certainty is the way that we can not only beat symptoms into the ground, but receive their crucial communication and achieve peace with ourselves. The columns break the material down into manageable pieces that also enhance the way you work on it. So this is the key point. You use the columns to figure out which part of your psychology is the main thrust of the symptoms, because that determines where and how to work for the solution. Again, the organization of the columns takes away the endless searching for information. Now let's look at how each column works in this regard. Here is how the emotions column can help you make sense of your mind-body experience. The emotions column is a point of organization around what is happening when you have the onset of a new symptom or an uptick in an already existing one. This column allows you to rule out any other cause of that change in symptom profile. You don't need to look anywhere else once you see that symptom presentation. The onset or uptick in symptoms, it is emotions column. You look within that, you rule out everything else for that time. Now the information you seek isn't so far and wide or open-ended. Now you have a much more limited area in which you need to search. This is why the emotions column has your major themes in it. Broad, high stakes, but tied to a specific experience or pattern in your life. The entirety of onsets and upticks is now encompassed in 6 to 10 themes. That's usually my ballpark number. You don't need to look anywhere else. That's it for onsets and upticks. The rules of the emotions column are battle-tested by me and all of the people with whom I've worked. So, if you can trust my system, the emotions column shrinks all the information you need for onsets and upticks and symptoms into a very small area. And you can start to look closer and closer and get more and more specific. You use the timing of the symptoms as a clue. You trust that it can always be made sense of, and then you find which theme is active. There's only one cause, one theme, and it is specific. It is about a present-day event, whether in external reality or in the confines of your own thinking and feeling. If you get to the specifics, you can gain control over onsets and upticks and symptoms. The columns provide clear understanding and objectives. In the emotions column, this is the clear objective. Use the themes to pinpoint what led to the onset or uptick of your mind-body symptoms. If you haven't nailed it, the symptoms stay as they are, but use the rules of the column to get it right and find success. Now let's move on to the doubt column. The doubt column organizes a different part of mind-body experience, chronic conditions. Once again, by locating the current problem you are having within a particular column rules out all other sources of the problem. Suddenly, you're not thinking about the emotions column at all because you know, by the way the symptoms are presenting, you're looking at doubt, and the rules of doubt are what applies. If the condition has been the same for a significant length of time, past which the emotional experience isn't the main thrust anymore, doubt has become the predominant force of the condition. Because you're breaking things down into parts, the doubt column can now give you some certainty. If you have a chronic symptom, either that is always there or comes back with a lot of regularity, you have doubt. This is a fact, and you don't need to wonder if it is true if you believe in the columns. From that fact, you can then work on the right problem. What is the doubt? What question is there? What is the confusion? Of what am I not certain? What fear has crept in? If you answer those questions, you will have your answers and you will get your relief within that column. This column gives you a chance to look much more specifically at what is getting in the way of relief. Once you've narrowed it down to the specific column in which you're working, you can, for the time being, dismiss the others. And that is part of why we have the columns. Think about how useful that is. You don't need to spend any time on your emotional life when you're working in the doubt column. You don't even need to spend much time on the power column, though there could be some overlap there, but not much. This makes it more efficient, more accurate, and more effective work. It takes up far less time and energy when you know which problem it is on which you are working. The goal of the doubt column is very simple, once again, with the columns in mind. Identify and articulate the doubts, and use science and logic to counter them until you are certain. The power column has its own function as well, and the fact that each column has its own function makes it easier to figure out which column you need to work on at any given moment. The power column is about plateaus, where you've gotten better, but then kind of stall out. Having this as a separate column in your mind means you can put aside emotions or doubt work when you are staring down a plateau. It is power column work, and that means we have identified the overall source. This is what the columns are for. Separate out the individual problems you face in the mind-body struggle. Start dealing with the active part of the problem, and find the specific solution. The power column is needed when your relationship with you isn't feeling good enough or you've become misaligned with the core of who you are. So the goal of this column is simple. Remember who you are once you've understood it. And that will guide all of your decisions. Through this column, you can learn to recognize the communication that is in the symptoms and choose the most powerful action for yourself that can alleviate the symptom. When you've made progress but you're stuck, this is the power column as the general solution. Then you use the information I've given you about each column, whichever column you find yourself in, to get at the specifics. In the end, the reason for the columns is that they tell the story of our symptoms most accurately, providing the information in the most clear and precise model we can have. At least that's the goal. And the right information, and our certainty in it, is what disarms the mind-body system from being active in symptoms. By breaking apart the types of symptom presentations, you can figure out which column to work in, rather than casting about for solutions or trying to find a one-solution-fits-all method, which is why many of the other systems work for some people but not all. Don't be daunted if it does not seem simplifying at first. Once you understand them well, the columns become much more simple and more fully integrated. On top of it all, because it is an organized system, it becomes easier once understood to make it automatic, which means you won't have to work so hard at it. Putting it as simply as I can in that, explaining it to a fifth grader kind of model, the columns are an organization system. And each column has new and specific information in it to then know what to do with each specific problem you face. The columns are an aid in being able to do this accurately, most quickly, and in the simplest form. To solve any problem, we need to understand its nature. This is what the columns are for. Identify the problem, understand it, and figure out the solution. I really hope you enjoyed this episode on the purpose of the columns, breaking it down as simply as I can. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and we'll get back to you personally.